We're going to start off with a 10-minute round with Mr. Cleary leading off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses again for returning. Mr. Rosser, just a few questions on some statements you just made. One of the statements you made was that a flag state might want to direct a foreign vessel to Canadian port so as to not to compromise the evidence. To your recollection, sir, in terms of foreign vessels outside the 200-mile limit, not inside Canadian waters, how often has that happened in the past 10 years?
Thank you for the question. There is one instance that I am aware of where a foreign flag vessel fishing outside of Canada's exclusive economic zone was directed by its flag state into a Canadian port. But under legislation as currently enacted, my understanding is that unless the boat requests entry into the port itself, which it may not choose to do, if it is in violation of applicable laws, we don't currently have the legal authority to accommodate that situation. It has occurred in at least one instance of which I am aware.
Okay, so that's one instance in the past 10 years that you're aware of, out of how many vessels that have been cited roughly over the past 10 years?
I might turn to my colleague, Mr. McLean, might be able to give you a more precise indication of how frequently citations have been issued over the past decade. Alan, do you have any?
I do. It will take me a minute to get to it.
Maybe I can move on to my next question.
Yep, and we'll come back.
Now, Mr. Rosser, you also talked about, you also spoke about the fact that more could, to use your word, inevitably be done. So maybe you can expand on that for a moment. What more could be done?
I was trying to allude to the fact that, I mean, as an illegal activity, IUU fishing inevitably evolves over time. While we believe that the Port State Measures Act and Bill S3 represent an important step forward, inevitably those engaged in illegal activities, as the international legal regime evolves, they too may respond to that in some fashion. That it is an evolving process. That we believe these are positive, concrete steps, both domestically and internationally. But we need to recognize as well that we're trying to discourage an activity that itself is continually evolving.
With all due respect, Mr. Rosser, I don't see this as concrete in any way whatsoever. I don't see this as changing the situation right now outside the 200-mile limit off the east coast of Canada in terms of foreign vessels, in terms of citations. I know the number of citations are down. I personally would say that part of the reason for that is because there's fewer fish to chase. When you say that, a question I asked you the other day, that you need ratification of 25 countries before this can come into force, I believe right now we have 11, so 11 of 25 nations. How long did it take you to get 11 nations to come on side with this, and how much longer do you think it would take you to get to your total of 25?
What I can say on that is I believe that's true, that there have been 11 countries that have acceded to the treaty to date. In addition to that, if memory serves, there are, I think, a total of 35 or so that have signed the treaty, or otherwise the state in question has indicated its intent to ratify the treaty. So there are dozens of countries, more than enough to bring this treaty into force, that, like ourselves, have signaled an intent to ratify and are moving through to take the necessary domestic measures to do so. Obviously, regulatory and legislative systems vary widely across the world when one is speaking of a global treaty, but we believe that this treaty does enjoy a significant international global consensus around it.
How much longer to get 25?
It's hard to put a precise timeline on it, but like I said, there are dozens of countries going through the similar processes to what we are going through now.
Rough estimate?
I would hope. I mean, this is fairly speculative on my part, but I would hope within a couple of years that we would see this treaty enter into force. We do believe, though, that beyond simply bringing Canada into compliance with this treaty, that this legislation will give our law enforcement officials additional abilities to carry out their responsibilities more effectively. In many cases,
I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. Rosser. You're going on a... I have some more questions. I only have limited time, so I say that with all due respect, sir.
Okay.
I asked you a question the other day in terms of, over the past 10 years, the number of citations that have been issued to foreign trawlers outside the 200-mile limit, and the follow-up in terms of the flag states, the home countries of the vessels in question, what penalties or court fines were imposed over the past 10 years. Can we have that information presented to this committee, sir?
What I would say is this. There is under, we're speaking, I think, in a NAFO context, a process whereby information is shared by countries undertaking enforcement measures in the NAFO zone. We believe that greater transparency in that regard would be beneficial. And
so is that a yes or a no?
What I was going to suggest was that we would certainly be willing to undertake with the NAFO parties a suggestion that greater transparency be brought to the information shared.
So that means no?
No, it doesn't mean no. It means that I believe that you've made a constructive suggestion that we've, upon reflection, have thought is worth raising with our NAFO partners.
So you need their permission first before you could do that?
It is a cooperative agreement, yes. And
do you think that's in Canada's best interest to get permission of foreign nations to release that sort of information that could be used to build a case against, say, the weaknesses of NAFO?
We think that it's important to work respectively with our international partners, and we think that transparency is important, and are willing to discuss with them how NAFO can become more transparent in this respect. Yes, so we appreciate your suggestion in that context.
Well, thank you. But I would really appreciate, though, that information. That would be that would make my day. In terms of you mentioned in terms of illegally caught fish outside the 200-mile limit, or illegally caught fish inside the 200-mile limit off the East Coast. You mentioned global numbers the other day, but do you have any numbers for specifically Grand Banks, Flemish cat?
Again, I will perhaps turn back to Mr. McLean, who might be able to offer greater precision than I in that matter. I don't know, Alan, as well, if you were able to lay your hands on the document you were seeking in response to the earlier question.
So just in response to the earlier question, and I have breakdowns I have to go through, but in 2000, so again, go back to 2002, there were 34 citations issued. In 2014, there were 9. And so we've seen that steady trend since 2002 downward. When there are changes in measures, sometimes we see a slight peak upwards, but we have seen traditionally the trend downward. Your question was related to value. Was that the question, the value of IUU product or illegal product fished on the Grand Banks? Was that the question?
No, I'm just looking for, do you have an amount, for example, of an estimate of the amount of illegally caught fish from the Grand Banks?
No, we do not.
Not even an estimate in terms of...
No, I have nothing here, and I don't know if there's been an evaluation done on that.
Do you have an estimate of the amount of illegally caught fish brought into Canadian ports?
Not with me.
But isn't this bill all about preventing illegally caught fish from coming into Canada?
Yes.
So if the purpose of this is to prevent illegally caught fish from coming into Canada, you don't have any estimates on how much fish is coming into Canada, or no idea of what kind of problem, the extent of this problem?
Alan or Angela may wish to offer their perspectives, but I mean, when we talk about IUU fishing, we're talking about a global problem. We know that the problem in global terms is Canada is a very minor contributor to it. We have a very robust
The answer is no.
regime.
You don't know how much.
Well, by definition, it's hard to be certain about the level of illegal activity.
Not even a ballpark. Not even a ballpark.
I would guess that we would probably have data on enforcement actions taken where we have identified instances of illegal fishing. Obviously, almost by definition, we can't know about those that we did not observe, but we take action where we see them, and as a result, are confident that it is a relatively minor problem in Canada.
Well, then why is this bill before the committee? If it's a relatively minor problem, you don't seem to have a grasp on the amount of illegally caught fish we're talking about. why are we taking the time to even look at this?
Well, because it is a very serious problem globally, and we're trying to do our part to help address a problem that is, although minor in Canada, serious globally. And in so doing with this legislation, it is also our view that we will improve in a very common sense way the enforcement powers of our fisheries officers and other law enforcement officials. So we see there being a domestic benefit to this legislation. And it is also a Canadian contribution to resolving what is a serious global problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cleary. Mr. Camp?
Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for